Italian mafia boss got a call from the hospital. She's fading fast and whispering your name. The rain over Red Hook was a cold, silver sheet, turning the container yards into a maze of slick, dark steel. It hammered the roof of the Bentley, a frantic drumbeat against the silence inside. Franco Ciara watched the water sluice across the armored glass, blurring the neon sign of a longshoreman's bar. His world was logistics, the precise, brutal mathematics of moving goods in and out of Brooklyn's veins. He controlled the flow, the tides, the blood of the harbor. Then the phone buzzed, a sharp vibration against the polished walnut console. He lifted it. The caller ID was blocked, but he knew the exchange, Tri-State Mercy. He answered without a word. The voice on the other end was tinny, rushed with the frantic energy of an emergency room. Is this Franco Ciara? Who is this? His voice was low, a rumble of gravel. This is Tri-State Mercy Hospital. We have a patient, a Jane Doe initially. Explosion trauma. She's fading fast. The nurse paused, her professionalism cracking. She's whispering your name. Franco's blood stopped. The rain, the engine, the entire city went silent. Her name. It was not a question. It was a command. We found an ID. Ray Donovan. Ray. The name hit him like a physical blow, a sudden, sharp pressure beneath his ribs. Ray Donovan, a freelance photographer with too much nerve and eyes the color of Irish whiskey, the only person in a decade who had looked at him, really looked at him, and forced the practiced, charming smile from his face, the only one who had ever made him stop smiling. He snapped the phone shut, the click echoing in the small space. Boss Silvio Moretti, his consigliere, sat in the passenger seat, his face a mask of careful concern, illuminated by the dashboard lights. Franco ignored him, thumbing a different number on his secure line. It connected on the first ring. Argent Crew. Locked down the route to Tri-State Mercy. All approaches. Now. And he didn't wait for confirmation. Just killed the call and threw the car into gear. The Bentley's engine roared, a controlled predator leaping into the storm. Franco, this is reckless, Silvio said, his voice calm, trying to anchor the storm. You, at a public hospital. Tonight you know who's watching. Shut up, Silvio. This isn't business. This is a distraction. The FOCD summons is on your desk. They're coming for the port, and you're running into the light. I said, shut up. Franco wrenched the wheel, cutting off a yellow cab that blared its horn before seeing the Bentley's imposing grille and falling silent. His knuckles were white. The summons, the feds, the creeping rot from rival outfits, it was all noise. The only thing he heard was Ray's name. The wipers fought the deluge, and in their rhythmic sweep, he saw her 2 years ago, the Fulton Fish Market at dawn. The air had been sharp with ice and brine. He was there for the community fund, handing out thick envelopes of cash to the widows of dock workers, a performance of benevolence he loathed but found necessary. Then he saw the lens. She was standing on a stack of wet pallets, her camera a third eye, her rain slicker a bright, defiant yellow. She wasn't just taking pictures of the charity, she was taking pictures of him. He'd started to smile, the politician's smile, the one that disarmed businessmen and warned rivals. She didn't smile back. Her gaze was level, analytical, cutting straight through the performance. She clicked the shutter, capturing the exact moment the smile died on his lips. The moment the real Franco Ciara surfaced, exposed and furious, she had seen him. Then she'd lowered the camera, held his gaze for one burning second, and vanished into the crowd. He'd never seen her again, until tonight. Tri-State Mercy was chaos held at bay. 2 black Escalades were parked diagonally across the ambulance bay, their high beams cutting the rain. Men in dark, tailored suits, his city shield unit stood at every entrance. They moved with the quiet efficiency of private military, not thugs. Hospital staff scurried past them, eyes down. The air smelled of antiseptic, wet wool, and fear. Franco walked through the automatic doors, the rain dripping from his black cashmere coat onto the linoleum. The Argent Crew parted for him. A haggard-looking doctor in blue scrubs met him by the nurse's station. "Mr. Ciara, I was told you were coming." "Where is she?" "Room 3. She's critical. Multiple shrapnel wounds from a car explosion, internal bleeding. We're stabilizing her for surgery, but she's lost a lot of blood." The doctor looked down at his chart, avoiding the intensity of Franco's stare. "She was holding this when they brought her in." He pointed to a terrified young nurse, who held up a small, professional-grade camera. Its body cracked, the lens shattered. "Before she lost consciousness, she grabbed my arm. She was specific." Franco looked at the nurse. The woman was trembling. What did she say? She just kept saying it. "Call Franco. Tell him. Call Franco." He moved past them without another word. Room 3 was a glass box under the harsh glare of fluorescent lights, and she was inside. Ray. She was so small on the gurney, a pale, still life against the stark white sheets, dwarfed by the machines that beeped and hissed around her. An oxygen mask covered her face, but he could see the freckles scattered across the bridge of her nose, the fiery red of her hair matted with grime and blood. He stood outside the glass, his hand resting flat against the cool surface. His reflection stared back at him, the sharp cut of his suit, the dark eyes, the handsome, cruel lines of a face built for command, but the man in the reflection was frozen, his expression unreadable, locked in a silent confrontation with the one thing he couldn't control, the one thing he hadn't known he feared, losing someone he had no right to claim. His phone vibrated in his pocket, a different tone, encrypted. He pulled it out, his eyes never leaving her still form. A new message from an unknown number. It was a single image, a micro SD card, tiny and black, resting on a concrete surface. It was covered in blood, fresh blood. Beneath the photo, one line of text. "She has your secrets." A cold rage, clean and sharp, sliced through the fear. It was a setup, the explosion, the call. It was all a trap, and she was the bait. As if on cue, the phone vibrated again, a reminder from his calendar. Federal Organized Crime Directorate, the summons Silvio had warned him about. They wanted him. His rivals wanted him. And now, someone had Ray. He clenched his jaw, the muscle leaping. The feds could wait. The secrets could wait. A brilliant flash of lightning lit the ER, casting the room in a stark, ghostly white for a split second. In that flash, he saw the truth. This hospital wasn't a sanctuary. It was a kill box. They had tried once. They would come back to clean up, to silence the woman who was whispering his name. He lowered the phone. His decision absolute. He wasn't waiting for surgery. He wasn't waiting for the FOCD. He was getting her out. Ray woke to darkness, a heavy, medicated blackness that pulsed with the rhythmic, soft beep of a machine. Her mind felt fractured, like a mirror dropped onto concrete. She tasted copper and antiseptic, flashes of memory, sharp and violent, pierced the fog, the acrid smell of burning fuel, the grinding crunch of metal, a blinding white heat, and then a voice. Low, urgent, cutting through the panic right by her ear, a man's voice, rough as gravel, speaking in Italian. "Stay con me, stay with me." Her eyes fluttered, struggling against the weight of the drugs. The darkness sharpened into the sterile twilight of an ICU room, lit only by the green glow of the monitors. The beeping was her heart. She tried to move, to lift her hand, but a jolt of liquid fire ripped through her side, stealing her breath in a silent gasp. The door to the room hissed open, spilling the harsh, unforgiving light of the hallway onto the floor. A figure filled the doorway, a silhouette of broad shoulders and coiled energy, blocking the light. Franco Ciara. He stepped inside, flanked by two of his city shield men and the nervous doctor from the emergency room. Franco's face was stone, carved from Mediterranean marble, his dark eyes unreadable as they swept the room, assessing the equipment, the monitors, and finally, her... He held a sheaf of papers. "Doctor, the authorization," Franco said. His voice was the same one from her memory, the one that had anchored her. He wasn't looking at her face. He was looking at the machines keeping her alive. The doctor stammered, "Mr. Ciara, this is highly irregular. She's not stable for transport. Her condition is critical." The Northeast Health Oversight Board disagrees. Franco pushed the papers into the doctor's chest with a clipped, final motion. A specialized imaging unit is waiting in the sublevel. You will prep her for transfer. Now. It was not a request, it was the shifting of tectonic plates, a command that expected and received absolute obedience. The doctor paled, recognizing the forged authority for what it was, a threat backed by power the hospital could not fight. He gave a jerky nod. "Nurse, get her ready." As the nurse bustled, Franco moved to the doorway, his body language tense, scanning the hall. His gaze locked onto a man in a rumpled, cheap suit standing near the elevators, speaking urgently into his phone. The man looked up, his eyes met Franco's, and they widened in recognition. Franco saw the man's ID clipped to his belt, NFCB, Northeast Financial Crimes Bureau. The agent turned his back, shielding his mouth. "It's him. Ciara. He's here, on the critical floor. I do not know why. Yes, send the team." Franco turned back into the room, his timeline just collapsing from hours to minutes. He moved to Ray's bedside in 2 long, silent strides, ignoring the nurse who fumbled with the gurney straps. He leaned close, the scent of expensive wool and the cold night air clinging to him. "Ray, can you hear me?" She managed a small nod, the movement agonizing. "You came." Her voice was a dry rasp. "They are coming for you." His eyes were not on her face. They were scanning her, searching, his gaze sharp and methodical. He saw a small, square bandage on her collarbone, just below the line of the hospital gown. It was too clean, too deliberate, out of place with the chaotic trauma of her other injuries. His hand, surprisingly gentle, brushed the thin cotton gown aside. Before the nurse could protest, his fingers found the edge of the bandage and peeled it back. Underneath was not a wound, not from the explosion. It was a small, precise incision, barely an inch long, held closed by a single butterfly stitch tucked inside the fold of skin. Gleaming darkly against her pale flesh was the black rectangle of a micro SD card. He looked at her, his eyes finally meeting hers, demanding the truth. Ray's own eyes filled with a terrifying clarity. The fog of medication burned away, replaced by raw, undiluted fear. She grabbed his wrist, her fingers shockingly cold but gripping with desperate strength. "No," she whispered, her voice cracking. "It's a trap. Don't. They will kill you. Franco, they will kill you for it." He never got the chance to ask who. A piercing, electronic wail split the air. The fire alarm. Red lights began to strobe, painting the room in rhythmic, frantic flashes of panic. Shouts erupted in the hallway, not the sounds of civilian evacuation. They were hard, barked commands. "Code Black," the doctor yelped, his face ashen. "Gray Harbor Collective. They're in the pharmacy wing." Franco didn't hesitate. He ripped the IV from Ray's arm and tore the sensor leads from her chest, silencing the monitor's frantic alarm. "Mr. Ciara, you cannot," the nurse screamed. He shoved the doctor and nurse toward the door. "Lock this room. Tell the feds she never woke up." He turned back to Ray. In one fluid, powerful motion, he scooped her off the gurney, his left arm securely under her knees, his right supporting her back, pulling her flush against his solid chest. She cried out, a sharp, choked sound as her wounds screamed in protest. "I have you," he growled, and kicked open a panel marked Service Access. They plunged into a narrow, concrete corridor lit by bare yellow bulbs. The hospital's sterile white disappeared, replaced by the building's gut-sweating pipes, thick conduit, and the smell of dust and ozone. He moved with a speed that defied his size, a predator navigating his element. Behind them, they heard the crash of her ICU room door being kicked in, followed by the muffled thwip, thwip, thwip of suppressed gunfire. The camera's Ray managed to gasp, her head spinning. "Are blind," Franco said, his voice tight with exertion. "Argent Crew controls the network. They see only loops." He burst through another door, back into a pristine white staff corridor. It was empty. The fire alarm having cleared the floor, they were exposed. He ran, his expensive leather shoes silent on the polished floor, carrying her as if she weighed nothing. The white walls blurred, the red strobe lights disorienting. He slammed his palm against the call button for a freight elevator, the doors sliding open immediately, a service he had prearranged. He stepped inside, and the doors closed, plunging them into the dim, steel box. The adrenaline holding her together dissolved. Ray let out a long, shuddering sob, the pain becoming absolute. It was unbearable. A white-hot knife twisting in her abdomen with every breath. "It hurts," she gasped, clutching the lapel of his coat, her face pale and damp with sweat. He didn't shush her. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He simply braced himself against the wall of the descending elevator and lowered his head until his forehead rested against hers. She could feel the intense heat radiating from him, the solid, unyielding strength. He smelled of rain and something metallic, like cold steel. "Respirare, Ray," he whispered, the Italian flowing over her, the same voice from the memory. "Stake in me, breathe with me, just breathe. You are safe." She focused on the pressure of his forehead against hers, the rumble of his voice vibrating through her skull. A spark ignited in the fog of her memory, the fish market, the lens, the way his smile had fallen. She felt her heart skip, a painful, dangerous lurch that had nothing to do with the shrapnel. The elevator dinged, opening onto the cold, damp concrete of the underground parking garage. A sleek, black ambulance was parked 20 feet away, its side bearing the discreet logo Starlight EMS, a company Franco owned. The driver's door was open. A woman with short, dark hair and the watchful expression of a hawk stood beside it, Vita Ruggieri, his most trusted driver. Vita saw them, threw open the back doors, and had a gurney ready. Franco quickly but gently transferred Ray to the gurney. Strapping her in as Vita jumped into the driver's seat, he climbed into the back, slamming the doors shut just as the engine roared to life. The ambulance peeled out, its sirens silent, blending instantly into the city's chaotic emergency traffic. Inside the swaying, dark interior, lit only by the green glow of a portable heart monitor, Franco finally looked at Ray. He gently, almost reverently, touched the bandage on her collarbone, his fingers just brushing her skin. "What is on it? Ray, why are they trying to kill you for it?" Ray's breathing was shallow. The ambulance ride was agony, every bump and turn sending fresh waves of pain. I was investigating the harbor. My harbor. A shell company, Orchid Reef Capital. The money, it was moving too fast. I followed it. Her words were broken, her memory returning in painful bursts. I got video, a meeting, on a boat. It is a ledger, not just cash. It lists officials, feds, dates. Franco's face was dark, unreadable in the shadows. Who? Ray's eyes met his, and the fear was back, absolute and devastating. Gray Harbor was there. But they were not leading. She paused, taking a ragged, painful breath. He was giving them access, routing, in exchange for them helping him take you down, from the inside. The name Ray. She looked at the man who had just saved her life, the man she had called for in her darkest moment, and delivered the final blow. Silvio. It is Silvio Moretti. Franco Sciarra did not move. He did not blink. He just stared into the darkness of the ambulance. The world he had meticulously built, the logistics, the loyalty, the entire Sciarra dynasty fracturing around him. Silvio, his advisor, his father's right hand, the man he trusted like a brother. If the card held what she claimed, the betrayal was not just a crack in the foundation. It was an earthquake that would bring the entire empire down. And he was driving right into the epicenter. The safe house was a glass box in the sky, a penthouse loft in Long Island City perched so high that the Queensboro Bridge felt like a personal walkway. Rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows, turning the city lights of Manhattan into a glittering, watercolor blur. The only sounds were the rhythmic drumming of the rain and the faint, persistent beep of a portable medical monitor. Ray was lying on a low, modern sofa, covered in a cashmere throw blanket. A fever was setting in, a septic warmth radiating from her wounds. Vida had cleaned and stitched the gash on her arm, the one from the shrapnel in the ambulance. But the deeper injuries pulsed with a dull, sickening ache. Franco had a laptop open on the concrete floor, the tiny micro SD card plugged into a reader. It started small, Ray whispered, her voice hoarse. She was forcing the memories back, piecing together the last 6 months, a shell company. Sierra Maritime Holdings, it was too obvious. A decoy. Franco's eyes remained fixed on the screen, but his entire body was listening. Go on. It was a breadcrumb. It led me to a Delaware fund, Orchid Reef Capital. She shivered, pulling the throw tighter. It was moving millions. Too much, too fast. I tagged a name on its board, a proxy, and followed him. He led me to the boat. Franco pressed play. The video was shaky, shot from a distance with a long lens, the audio filtered to remove the wind, but it was clear. A sleek yacht moored in the dark waters off Sheepshead Bay. 2 men were visible on the deck, illuminated by a single service light. One was Silvio Moretti, the other, Maxim Rudenko, the brutal head of the Gray Harbor Collective. The audio was chillingly clear. Silvio, his voice smooth and reasonable, laying out the plan. The FOCD summons is just the start. They build a RICO case. Franco goes down, but they need more. They need a direct link to Gray Harbor. I give them that link. I give them him. Rudenko, his voice a thick Eastern European growl, said, and we get the port access, the clean routes. You get the routes, Silvio confirmed. I get the chair. The family will be bleeding. They will need a leader to stop the bleeding. I will be that leader. The video ended. Franco closed the laptop, the click echoing in the vast, silent room. He said nothing. He simply stood, walked to the window, and stared out at the rain-drenched city he was supposed to control. The betrayal was absolute, a clean cut to the bone. Ray started to shiver violently, her teeth chattering. The fever was spiking. Franco turned, his face a mask, but his movements were quick. He retrieved the medical kit Vida had left, filled a basin with water, and found clean cloths. He knelt beside the sofa. This will sting, he said, his voice flat. He was all business, his hands precise as he unwrapped the crude bandage on her side. The wound was red, angry. She flinched as he began to clean it with antiseptic. I am sorry, she whispered, her eyes squeezed shut. His hands stopped. He looked up, his dark eyes meeting hers. The anger was there, but it was banked, held deep beneath a layer of something else, something cold and controlled. For what? For doing your job, for telling the truth. For bringing this to you. He returned to his work, his touch surprisingly gentle as he applied a fresh dressing. You did not bring it. You just turned on the lights. He secured the bandage and then, unexpectedly, his hand lingered, his thumb brushing the uninjured skin of her hip. It was a touch devoid of romance, yet more intimate than a kiss, a simple, human acknowledgement. He met her gaze, and the mask cracked. She saw the man from the fish market, the one who had stopped smiling. I am not asking you to trust me, Ray. I am asking you to trust what you see when you look at me. A sudden, sharp crack exploded next to his head. In the same fraction of a second, the window behind him erupted into a spiderweb of fractured glass. Franco moved with impossible speed. He did not duck. He lunged forward, his entire body covering hers, shielding her from the implosion of glass that sprayed across the room. The sound of the sniper's report, a heavy thump, echoed a second later from across the river. Vida Franco roared, his voice muffled as he pressed Ray's face into the sofa cushions. Another shot, crack. This one hit the concrete column in the center of the room, chipping off a chunk of stone. From the kitchen area where Vida Ruggieri had been watching the service entrance, came a high-pitched whine. Vida slid across the floor, low and fast, a small controller in her hand. Rooftop, 2 o'clock high. He is on the move. A small, quad-propeller drone, no bigger than a dinner plate, shot out from the balcony and climbed into the rain. A moment later, a small canister dropped from it, and the sniper's nest across the river was instantly obscured by a cloud of thick, gray smoke. "We are blown," Vida said calmly, already moving to the steel-reinforced exit. "Fire escape, now." Franco hauled Ray to her feet. She cried out as her wounds pulled, but he didn't slow, half lifting, half dragging her. "You can walk," he commanded, his voice hard. "Walk." Adrenaline surged, numbing the pain. They moved through the apartment, glass crunching under their feet. They burst onto the narrow, wet metal of the fire escape, the wind and rain hitting them like a physical blow. The city air was cold, tasting of iron. As they descended the slick, rattling stairs, Ray clung to Franco's arm, her heart hammering, the violence, the speed, the cold efficiency of it all. This was his world. It was not a performance. It was real. And as she held on to him, the rain plastering her hair to her face, a cold, terrifying thought hit her. Was she becoming part of it? They reached the alley. The black ambulance was waiting, engine idling, Vida already behind the wheel. Franco pushed Ray into the back and climbed in after her, slamming the doors as the tires spun on the wet asphalt. Inside, breathing heavily in the darkness, Franco pulled out his phone. He did not call his capos. He did not call his muscle. He dialed a number from memory, a clean number. "Luca, I need you." Luca Finori was his civil lawyer, the man who handled his clean port logistics and real estate. "Franco, what is this? It is 3 a.m. I am sending you a file, a name, Orchid Reef Capital. I need a tracer. I need to know every dollar in, every dollar out, and where it lands. But you cannot do it. You are too clean. The summons proves you are being watched." "What are you asking, Franco?" "I need Arden Cho," Franco said. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Arden Cho was a digital ghost, a former federal forensic accountant turned high-priced independent investigator. She was brilliant, expensive, and answered to no one. "Arden Cho will not work for you, Franco. She works for justice." "Then tell her justice is what I am paying for," Franco said, and hung up. He leaned his head back against the wall of the ambulance, the first sign of fatigue showing. Ray watched him in the dim light. Her eyes drifted to his hand, the one gripping the phone. A faint, white scar cut across the back of his wrist. It was old, puckered. She remembered it from the hospital, when his hand had been on the glass. "Your wrist," she whispered. He glanced at it, as if surprised she had noticed. A winch cable. It snapped, years ago. A new man on the dock. Too young to be scared, too slow to move. "You saved him." He just looked at her. "I saved an asset. The cable cost me $8,000 to replace." But his voice was flat, and she knew he was lying. She saw the other man again, the one who handed out cash at the fish market, the one who held her forehead in the elevator, the one who had just lied to protect a memory of goodness. His second phone, the encrypted one, buzzed, a text from the same unknown number that had sent the picture of the bloody card. Franco read it, his face hardening into granite. He showed her the screen. "Tomorrow night, Pier 36. Bring her and the card, 1 for 1. 1 for 1, Ray breathed. "One what?" Franco's eyes were cold fire. "It is a trap, not a trade. He's offering me my life, in exchange for yours." He clenched his fist, the phone disappearing inside it. "He knows me. He knows I will come. Using what I care about to corner me. That is how Silvio thinks. That is his signature." The ambulance rolled to a stop in the overgrown drive of a place long forgotten by God. San Aurelio, Staten Island, a Gothic revival church, deconsecrated and left to crumble. Its windows boarded or broken, ivy crawling over the stone like a shroud. Vida killed the engine, plunging them into a silence broken only by the relentless drumming of rain on the slate roof. Franco led Ray inside through a heavy oak sacristy door. The air within was cold, thick with the smell of damp stone, decaying hymnals, and the faint, sweet trace of old incense. He lit a row of thick votive candles on the main altar, their small flames casting a warm, golden light that fought against the immense, swallowing shadows. The rain against the high, stained glass windows sounded like 1,000 broken rosaries scattering on the floor. Ray huddled in the front pew, wrapped in a heavy wool army blanket Franco had stashed in the ambulance. The fever had receded, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness and a sharp, throbbing clarity. "This is where you hide," she whispered, her voice echoing slightly in the vast, empty space. Franco stood by the altar, his back to her, staring up at a fractured crucifix. "This is where I come when I need to think. It is the only place in this city that is truly quiet." "You hate power," Ray said suddenly, the words surprising even herself. "The kind that men like Silvio use, the kind that crushes people just to get higher." He turned, his face half in shadow, half in candlelight. "What do you know about power?" "I know what it looks like from the bottom." She pulled the blanket tighter. "I grew up in Southie. My father was a drinker. When he was deep in it, he was a different man, a big man, full of rage. He used his size, his voice, to make everyone else in the house feel small, afraid." She glanced at the cracked camera resting on the pew beside her. "This was my escape, my armor. I could hide behind the lens. I was not a participant, I was just an observer. I promised myself I would spend my life pointing this thing at men who abuse their power." She met his gaze, the accusation clear. "Men who look like you." Franco walked toward her, his footsteps the only sound in the church. He did not sit beside her, but in the pew directly across the narrow aisle. So they were facing each other, their knees almost touching. "My mother," he said, his voice low, "came from Palermo with $30 and no English. She sold pizza slices from a pushcart in Red Hook. The old bosses, the ones who wore the pinky rings and smelled of cigars. They came by, they wanted a cut, a tax on her labor." He leaned forward, his forearms resting on his knees. She said no. They kicked over her cart, spilled the sauce onto the sidewalk. She cleaned it up. She was back the next day. They came back, angry. She stood in front of her cart, holding the big knife she used to cut the pies, and she told them in broken English they would have to kill her to move her. His eyes were locked on hers, the darkness in them reflecting the candlelight. That night, she told me, "Francesco, power is not evil. Power is a tool, like this knife. It can cut the bread, or it can stab a man. How you use it, that is everything." She never paid them a dime. "I do not use my power to make people small, Ray. I use it to protect my own." The silence that followed was heavy, charged. The air between them crackled like static electricity. The only sound was the rain, a constant rushing whisper. Ray felt an undeniable pull, a force stronger than her fear, stronger than her judgment. She stood, wincing as her injuries pulled, and crossed the small space between them. She stopped directly in front of him, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. He did not move. He did not even breathe. He just watched her, his expression unreadable, waiting. She lifted a hand, her fingers trembling slightly. She did not touch his face. She did not touch his shoulder. She placed her palm flat against his chest, directly over his heart. Under her hand, she felt its steady, powerful beat, strong, calm, the heart of a man in complete control. She held his gaze, and then his heart kicked, a sudden, violent thump-thump against her palm, a betraying rhythm, his control, his iron will, fractured by her touch. "Do not," he whispered, his voice a gravelly warning. She leaned in and pressed her mouth to his. The kiss was instant, explosive. It was not gentle. It was a collision of fear and adrenaline, a desperate claiming. His lips were firm, demanding, and he tasted of the cold rain and something metallic, like resolve. His hands came up, not to her face, but to her waist, his fingers splaying wide, gripping her, pulling her flush against him as he stood. His heavy cashmere coat fell from his shoulders to the stone floor. His other hand tangled in her hair, tilting her head, holding her as he deepened the kiss. It was a raw, primal act, a desperate affirmation of life in the face of the death that hunted them. Ray's hands gripped his shirt, holding on as if she were falling. He pressed her back against the solid, carved wood of the pew, his body shielding hers from the cold air. Then, a sharp, involuntary gasp escaped her. It was not passion, it was pain. Her wounds. Franco broke away instantly, as if he had been burned. He was breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling, his eyes black with a desire that was now warring with a sudden, fierce concern. He looked from her face down to her side, where her hand had gone to press against the bandage. He did not step back. His hands, which had been gripping her with bruising force, softened. One hand moved to the nape of her neck, his thumb stroking her skin, supporting her weight. The other rested gently on her hip, steadying her. He held her gaze, his own full of 1,000 unspoken questions. His eyes asked what his words could not. "Are you sure?" She gave a single, slow nod. When he kissed her this time, all the violence was gone. It was slow, tender, almost reverent. It was a kiss of profound discovery, a quiet exploration. His lips moved over hers with a gentleness she would not have believed possible, a silent promise. Later, they were lying on an old army blanket in the sacristy, the small room smelling of dust and dried flowers. They were both still fully clothed, the blanket pulled over them, sharing its meager warmth. The rain was a softer sound in here. They lay facing each other, their hands clasped in the small space between them. He reached out and, with one finger, traced the line of the new bandage peeking from the collar of her shirt. His touch was feather-light. He leaned in, his gaze fixed on the wound, and pressed his lips to the gauze. It was not a kiss of passion, but of penance, a silent acknowledgement of the pain she had endured for him, because of him. The quiet, tender gesture broke down the last of her defenses. "At the hospital," she whispered, her voice thick, "when I was in the ambulance. Before you got there, I knew I was fading. I was trying to hold on." He watched her, his expression unreadable, waiting. "They asked me if there was anyone to call, and I tried to think. I tried to think of the last true thing I wanted to hold on to." Her eyes shimmered with tears she refused to let fall. "I did not say my mother's name. I said yours. I called for you. Franco. I thought it was the last thing I would ever get to say." His throat worked, and he had to look away, visibly undone by her confession. A deep, mournful bong cut through the night, vibrating through the stone walls, a nearby church, one still among the living. Striking the hour, the spell was broken. Time was moving again. Pier 36 and Silvio were waiting. Franco sat up, his movements stiff. He stood and pulled his coat back on, the heavy wool settling on his shoulders like a mantle of responsibility. He looked down at her, the woman who had seen him at the fish market, the woman who had carried his secrets, the woman who had called for him at the end. He offered her his hand and pulled her to her feet. "This meeting, this one-for-one trade," he said, his voice now cold. "All business. Silvio thinks he knows me. He thinks I am a businessman. He's offering me a deal. Your life, your silence. For a false peace. For my empire." He cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. "I will not trade you for a false peace. I will not trade you for anything." Pier 36 was a desolate stretch of concrete and steel, silent save for the rhythmic slap of the East River against the pilings. The air was cold and heavy with the promise of more rain. A single refrigerated truck, bearing the anonymous logo, Sierra Cold Chain Logistics, rolled past the unmanned security gate and came to a stop in the deep shadow between two towering container cranes. Inside the dark, cold trailer, Franco finished checking the straps on the thin, lightweight Kevlar vest hidden beneath Ray's hoodie. It was rigid and unfamiliar, pressing painfully against her bruised ribs and the fresh dressing on her side. "The camera," he said, his voice a low command. "The directional mic is live. Ray confirmed. Her voice was steady, but her hands were not. She lifted the camera, its weight a familiar comfort. It should capture clean audio from up to 50 feet away. Arden, are you set? Franco spoke into a tiny, flesh-colored earpiece. I am inside the Port Authority network. Arden Cho's voice replied, crisp and devoid of emotion. Vita has the drone airborne, thermal optics online. I am monitoring all local law enforcement frequencies and a few Gray Harbor channels I picked up. You are clear, for now. Stay in the shadow of the truck. Franco ordered Ray. You are not a participant, you are the witness. Whatever happens, you keep that lens steady. What is the plan? Franco? Silvio thinks he is a kingmaker. He thinks he is laying a trap. Franco slid the heavy trailer door open, the sound masked by the groan of a nearby buoy. I'm going to give him the crown and watch him bleed for it. He stepped out into the open, a solitary figure under a single, flickering yellow lamp. Ray moved to the edge of the trailer, melting into the darkness, the camera's long lens finding him, focusing. They did not have to wait. From the blackness between container stacks, figures emerged, not 2 or 3, but a dozen. They walked with the heavy, sure-footed arrogance of predators. Maxim Rudenko, his massive, shaven head gleaming under the lamp, led them. But he stopped, moving respectfully to the side. Silvio Moretti stepped through the phalanx of armed men. He was immaculate in a dark charcoal overcoat, his silver hair perfectly combed. He looked at Franco, his expression one of mild disappointment. Alone. Franco, I expected more. Ceremony. He glanced past Franco into the shadows. And the journalist. The trade is for both. She is safe, Franco said, his voice flat, carrying across the damp air. As long as I am... You got your meeting. Now talk. This is not a negotiation. Franco, it is a transition. Silvio said, his voice a smooth, reasonable purr. You are a liability. The FOCD is building a RICO case that will gut this family. They have you tied to the port, but they cannot tie you to the street. I, however, can... He smiled, a thin, reptilian gesture. But I have a better way. I have a man inside the bureau, a high-level man. He's willing to indefinitely suspend the investigation, the heat, the summons, the surveillance. It all evaporates, in exchange for a small price. Her, Franco said. And the card she carries, Silvio nodded. They need to close the loop. A dead, rogue journalist who got too close and a destroyed piece of false evidence. It is clean. You go back to your desk, I go back to mine. And you get your power, Franco said. I stopped the bleeding. The family needs a leader, not a target. Franco was silent for a long moment, the tension stretching tight. My father had a saying, Franco said, his voice dropping, the New York Italian accent thickening, the words clipping. La famiglia. It is not a chair you sit on when it rains. It is the roof. It is the foundation. You just tried to sell the stones for firewood. Silvio. Silvio's smile faded. He let out a long, theatrical sigh. I had hoped you would be smart. This is a shame. He turned his head. Maxim. Rudenko raised his hand to signal his men. Before he could drop it, the pier exploded in noise and light. FOCD do not move hands in the air. 2 black transport vans, sirens screaming, skidded across the asphalt, their high beams pinning both groups in a blinding glare. Men in dark blue windbreakers with FOCD emblazoned in yellow letters poured out, leveling tactical rifles. It was chaos. Rudenko's men caught completely off guard, hesitated, some raising their hands. Franco, it is a raid, Ray yelled. Her voice panicked. But Franco had not moved. He was smiling, a cold, sharp, terrifying smile. No, look at their boots, Ray. She zoomed in with the lens. The agents were wearing mismatched tactical boots, scuffed, civilian. They are not feds, Franco said, his voice laced with contempt. They are Gray Harbor. As he spoke, the agents opened fire, not on Franco, but directly into Maxim Rudenko's shocked men. It was a massacre, a double cross. Silvio was cleaning house, eliminating his rivals and the witness in one move. "Vita now," Franco roared. From the dark sky, a small object dropped from the drone. It hit the concrete in the center of the firefight and detonated with a blinding, concussive thwomp. A flashbang grenade, the world went white, the sound of the guns replaced by a deafening, high-pitched ringing. Franco was already moving, grabbing Ray by the arm and yanking her from the truck. "Run container maze south." They plunged into the narrow, dark canyons between the stacks of steel containers. The night became a labyrinth of echoing gunfire and shouts. Ray stumbled, her side screaming, but she kept the camera tight to her chest, its small, integrated GoPro recording. They reached an intersection of containers. Franco pulled her flat against the cold steel. He peered around the corner. Silvio, his vision already clearing, was furious. One of the fake-fed gunmen, disoriented by the flash, had stumbled and was now raising his rifle towards Silvio, confused. "You idiot," Silvio snarled. He did not hesitate. He drew his own pistol, a gleaming silver Beretta, and fired twice. 2 clean shots. The man in the FOCD jacket collapsed. Ray's camera caught it all. Silvio, his face twisted in rage, gun in hand, standing over the man he had just murdered. "I got it," she gasped. "Franco, I got the shot." "Arden, light them up," Franco yelled into his earpiece. "As you wish," Arden's voice replied. A fraction of a second later, the entire pier ignited. Every floodlight, every high-mast lamp, every crane light snapped on, bathing the yard in the brutal, shadowless glare of a stadium. Silvio was caught in the open, his gun still raised, his face exposed to Vita's high-definition drone camera. A shot cracked from above, a sniper perched on a container. The bullet sparked off the steel frame inches from Franco's head. He was pinned. Before the sniper could acquire him again, Ray reacted. She shoved Franco with all her strength, pushing him behind the solid steel of the corner block. He fell hard. At the same instant, a white-hot, tearing pain ripped through her left shoulder. She screamed, a short, sharp sound. Stumbling back, she clutched the wound, her hand instantly coming away slick and dark with blood, but her other hand held the camera, its grip like iron. "Ray," his voice was a raw, animal sound of pure fury. He lunged for her, but a new sound sliced through the night, a different siren, sharper, closer, and rapidly multiplying. "Real ones," Arden's voice was urgent. "NYPD, multiple units, responding to shots fired, 30 seconds out." Silvio heard it. He looked at the body at his feet, at the floodlights, at the approaching blockade of blue and white lights. He was done. He sprinted to the edge of the pier, throwing himself into a low-profile speedboat that was hidden in the shadows. The engine roared to life, and he was gone, a black smear vanishing into the river's darkness. Maxim Rudenko, dazed and disarmed, was left standing alone as the first NYPD cruisers skidded to a halt. Franco grabbed Ray, pulling her deeper into the maze, his hand pressed tight against her bleeding shoulder. In the sterile, white offices of Luca Finori, the only sound was the quiet click of a keyboard. Arden Cho, her face illuminated by the blue light of 3 monitors, navigated a series of encrypted portals. The small, blood-stained micro SD card sat in a secure reader next to her. "The file is partitioned," Arden said, her voice flat. "The video from Pier 36, time-stamped and authenticated, is routing to the Eastern District Court's protected whistleblower channel. It is anonymous." "And the ledger?" Luca asked, pacing nervously, loosening his silk tie. "The Orchid Reef Capital data is flowing through a different pipe," Arden said. "It is going to the Civic Integrity Network. They will feed it directly to the FOCD's Financial Crimes Unit, making it look like an internal discovery. The source remains invisible." She hit the final enter key. It is done. The game has moved to the federal level. The game had also moved for Ray. She was in a witness safe haven, a clean, beige apartment in a faceless building in Midtown, coordinated by the Metropolitan Justice Council. It was a gilded cage. There were no windows that opened. The food was delivered by a silent attendant, and she was not allowed a phone or internet access, only a small television. She watched the local news. The Pier 36 gangland shootout was the lead story, followed by reports of a sudden, intense FOCD probe into several prominent city councilmen. The name Orchid Reef Capital was mentioned. The seeds Arden had planted were sprouting in the public eye. The arrows were all pointing at Silvio, who had vanished. But Ray felt trapped. She was safe, but she was a pawn, removed from the board. Franco was not removed. He was in the center of the inferno. He stood in the back room of his mother's old restaurant in Red Hook, a place now reserved for family business. The air was thick with cigar smoke and the smell of old wine. 20 capos, the leaders of the Sierra crews, were seated around a massive dark oak table. They were restless, their faces grim. The FOCD is crawling all over the port. One capo, a heavy man named Petri, said, "They are auditing every container, every manifest, this heat, Franco. It is because of the girl." "She is a witness," another argued. "She is a problem. The feds have her." "No," a third, younger capo said. "The feds do not have her. She's in a civil safe house. She's not in federal custody, which means she is still a target, and we are protecting her." "Well, this is not our way." Petrie slammed his hand on the table. "We do not go to war with the entire city over a journalist. Give her up. Give her to Silvio. Let him have his deal. Let him choke on it, or give her to the feds. Make her their problem. Appease them." "Appease," Franco's voice, quiet until now, cut through the smoke like a razor. He walked slowly from the shadows to the head of the table. "You want me to hand a woman who was nearly killed for us, to the man who betrayed us. You want me to feed her to the wolves to buy us a week of quiet." He unfastened the heavy gold signet ring from his finger, the one his father had worn. He tossed it onto the center of the table. It landed with a heavy, definitive thud. "My father built this family on one word, loyalty. Not profit, not peace, loyalty." His eyes were black holes, devoid of all warmth. Silvio spat on that. He chose betrayal. Anyone in this room who chooses it with him. "Step over that ring." The room was dead silent. Two of the oldest capos, men who had served his father, slowly lowered their heads, their gaze averted. It was a gesture of submission. But the young capo, the one who had spoken of her as a target, stood. His name was Tino. He was ambitious, volatile. "Loyalty is a luxury. Franco, we are a business, and you are making a bad decision based on what her—" He drew a knife, a quick, flashing motion, a stiletto. "The family is bigger than your—" He never finished the word. Franco moved with a speed that was almost invisible. He did not grab the knife hand. He grabbed the wrist, twisted it backward, breaking the bone with an audible snap. He spun Tino around, slamming his face into the table, the knife clattering to the floor. In the same motion, Franco's hand was on the back of Tino's neck, forcing his head down. It took 3 seconds, 3 brutal, efficient, horrifying seconds. Tino was choking, his body rigid with agony. Franco was not even breathing hard. He looked at the other men, his hand still holding Tino's face to the wood. "Do you see a man making a decision based on weakness, or do you see your boss?" He released Tino, who collapsed to the floor, clutching his broken wrist. "Get him out!" Franco picked up his ring, sliding it back onto his finger. "The hunt for Silvio is not a negotiation. It is an execution. We find his money, we find his allies, we burn them to the ground. Is that understood?" The capos, one by one, nodded. "Yes, boss." Miles away, in her beige cage, Ray sat on the floor, her laptop, the one Arden had scrubbed and given her, open. She was not looking at the news. She was in her own photo archives. She found the folder Fish Market 2 years ago. She clicked past the photos of the widows, past the shot of Franco's smile dying. She stopped on a frame she had almost forgotten taking. Franco, after the charity was done, thinking no one was watching. He was kneeling by a stack of crates, talking to a small, homeless boy who had been trying to steal fish in the photo. Franco was not angry. He was listening, his head tilted, and in his hand, he was holding a $100 bill, pressing it into the boy's small, dirty palm. Her journalistic ideal to expose the powerful slammed into the reality of her heart. The world was not black and white. Franco was not a simple villain. He was a complex, dangerous, and perhaps a good man trapped in a dark legacy. A knock came at her door. It was not the food attendant. It was Vita Ruggieri. "Your cage is open," Vita said, her expression unreadable. "Franco wants you moved. It is time to finish this." Vita drove her to the abandoned church. Franco was there, standing by the altar. The maps of the North River Yard spread across the pew. "Arden found it," Vita said, tapping the map. "Silvio's blood money. He's not just hiding, he's liquidating. He has a massive cash reserve in 2 refrigerated containers at the old rail yard. He's planning to buy his way out of the country." "If we hit that," Franco said, his voice a low rumble, "we cut his legs off. He will have no allies, no escape, no future." Ray looked at the map. She looked at Franco. She touched the wound on her shoulder, which still ached. "I am going," she said. It was not a question. Franco turned to her. "No, you are the witness. You are the one thing I have to keep safe. Vita will take you to a new location." "And then what?" Ray stepped toward him, her eyes flashing with a fire he had not seen since the pier. "I hide in another beige room I run. I let you and Silvio tear the city apart over a card I carried. No, I started this. I am going to be there when it ends. If I run now, I will be running my whole life. Franco." He stared at her, the argument dying on his lips. He saw the woman from the fish market, the one with the defiant eyes. He saw the woman who had shoved him out of the line of fire. She was not a victim to be protected. She was a soldier. He hesitated, his gaze softening as he looked at her bandaged shoulder. "You are not a soldier. Ray, you are wounded." "And that makes me careful," she retorted. "You need me. You need my camera. You need the truth to win, not just your guns." Franco was silent for a long, heavy moment. He looked at Vita, who gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. He turned back to Ray. "You come, but on one condition." "What?" "This is not a street brawl. This is a surgical operation. Arden will be our eye. Vita will be our muscle. And you," he said, tapping the map, "you will make the final call. When to move, when to expose, when to strike. The entire operation is on your go. I am giving you the power. Ray, I want to see how you use it." She met his gaze, unflinching. "Fine." The 3 of them bent over the map, the rail yard, the containers, the escape routes. The final night was being planned, 2 in the morning. The North River yards were a graveyard of steel, wrapped in a cold, gray fog that deadened all sound. The air smelled of river water and rust. Hidden in the deep shadow of a derelict boxcar, Ray shivered. Her watch, a simple, dark digital face, was set to Arden's link. She aimed her long lens through a gap in the rotting wood, the camera's sensor struggling in the low light. In her earpiece, Arden's voice was a whisper of static. "Diversion is a go. Franco's trucks are at the south gate." Through the lens, Ray saw them, the headlights of 2 Sierra cold chain trucks, their refrigeration units humming loudly. Approaching the main checkpoint as predicted, 2 guards moved to intercept them, their flashlights cutting weak beams through the mist. "The guards are engaged," Ray whispered, her voice barely audible. "Vita is moving," Arden replied. Ray panned her lens upward. A dark figure, almost invisible against the steel, was ascending the massive gantry crane that overlooked the container field. Vita Ruggieri moved like a spider, silent and sure. She reached the operator's cab, a glass box suspended 100 feet in the air. A new crackle in her ear. "I am inside the rail yard's network, and I am in the city grid. I am creating the blind spot. The ghost call is routing. Your 12 minutes start now." Ray looked at her watch. A new timer appeared, 12:00. It began to tick down. 11:59. She held her breath. Panning her lens back to the yard, she heard a new voice in her ear. fed from a hacked radio frequency, Silvio's. Change positions, Delta Team. Move to the west perimeter. I want eyes on those trucks. Box them in, but do not engage until I give the word. He was taking the bait. A moment later, the door of the main maintenance shed creaked open, spilling yellow light onto the wet gravel. Silvio Moretti stepped out, immaculate in his gray Macintosh, flanked by 4 men in tactical gear, the ex-military team. Silvio looked around, sniffing the air. He turned his head, his gaze sweeping the line of derelict cars. His eyes seemed to lock directly onto Ray's hiding spot. Her heart stopped. She froze, terrified she had been seen. But he was not looking at her. He was looking at the shadow beside her. Franco stepped out from the fog, his hands empty, his posture relaxed. Silvio's men snapped their rifles up. Silvio just smiled, a thin, cold gesture. Franco, you came. I'm surprised you would risk your new asset. He nodded toward Ray's hiding spot, his smile widening. Tell the girlie her photos are quite lovely. She has a good eye for composition. I have been following her work for months. He knew. He had known all along. This is it, Silvio? Franco's voice was calm, conversational. He was stalling. Ray kept the camera steady, the directional mic capturing every word. All this, the lies, the blood, for a chair. It was always my chair. Silvio's voice rose, losing its smooth, reasonable tone, cracking with decades of resentment. I held this family together while your father was dying and you were playing at being a legitimate businessman. I built the house. I had the right to the keys. You did not build it, Franco countered, his voice like ice. You rotted it from the inside. I burned the Ciara house to get the throne, Silvio roared, his face twisting, the mask of the consigliere gone, revealing the rabid animal beneath. And I will burn you with it. Got it. Ray whispered into her mic. Her watch read 9:43. Above them, silent in the mist, Vita aligned the crane. The heavy magnetic hoist, a massive steel disc, lowered itself over a dark blue container. With a soft, heavy clank that was lost in the hum of the refrigerated trucks, it locked on. Vita has the package, Arden's voice confirmed. Do it, Franco said, his voice just loud enough for Silvio to hear. Silvio looked confused. Do what? With a groan of protesting metal, the blue container was lifted from the stack. It swung free, dangling 100 feet in the air. Silvio's face went white with fury. No, put it down, put it down. It is over, Silvio, Franco called out. Your money, your escape, and it is gone. Silvio raised his hand, his silver beretta appearing instantly. Kill him! His private team raised their rifles. But before they could fire, the night exploded. A torrent of automatic gunfire erupted from the shadows behind Silvio, not from his men, from the darkness. Gray Harbor, Maxim Rudenko's men, emerging from between the train cars, firing on everyone. It was a 3-way war. Silvio's tactical team returned fire, creating a deafening, chaotic crossfire. Bullets sparked off steel, whining and ricocheting through the narrow alleys. Franco, Ray screamed. Franco was already moving. He grabbed her, pulling her back as rounds stitched the wooden wall where she had been hiding. He saw a large, loose sheet of corrugated steel siding on the ground. He snatched it, holding it up like a primitive shield, pushing Ray behind it. Stay down, he yelled. Sparks flew as bullets hammered the metal plate, the impacts deafening. Franco grunted, the force pushing him back, but he held his ground. Ray was on the ground, the world reduced to noise and flashes of light. She saw her opening. Franco was pinned, holding the shield. Silvio, momentarily forgotten in the chaos, was in the open, firing his pistol at the Gray Harbor gunman, his face a mask of rage. Behind him, the container of his money swung gently in the air. This was the shot. She shoved her camera, her precious camera, sliding it on the wet gravel away from her, into the safety of a gully. She rolled after it, landing hard on her wounded shoulder, a sharp cry of pain lost in the gunfire. She picked it up, she raised it. The lens was steady. Click! Silvio. His gun raised, his face twisted in fury. Click! The dangling container, his entire fortune, swinging like a pendulum. Click! His own men, now firing on Gray Harbor, the proof of the war, the entire story in 3 frames. Her watch buzzed, a frantic vibration against her wrist. Arden, her voice was frantic in the earpiece. 12 minutes are up, the ghost call expired. FOCD is rolling. They are real, get out, get out. As if her words were the command, the rail yard ignited. Every single floodlight, every high-mast security lamp, every light on the gantry crane snapped on, bathing the yard in the brutal, shadowless glare of a stadium. The fog vanished, burned away by 1,000 suns. Everyone froze. The gunfire sputtered and stopped. Every shooter, from Gray Harbor and Silvio's team, was caught, exposed. And then, the new sound. Sirens, not 1 or 2, a dozen, a symphony of them, coming from all sides. The real Federal Organized Crime Directorate and the entire NYPD were closing the net in the blinding, chaotic glare of the floodlights. Silvio Moretti was a cornered animal. The sirens were screaming. Closer now. A wall of sound sealing the rail yard. He looked at the swinging container. His fortune. He looked at the approaching phalanx of federal agents. He looked at Franco. Desperate, he saw his last piece of leverage. Vita Ruggieri, her weapon holstered, was moving from the base of the crane, making her way toward Franco. She was exposed. Silvio lunged, grabbing her from behind, yanking her back against his chest. His silver Beretta was free. The muzzle pressed hard against her temple. "Drop it! Franco!" Silvio shrieked, his voice tearing, all the smooth control gone. "Drop your gun, or I swear to God, I will kill her right here." Vita froze, her body rigid, her eyes wide but filled with fury, not fear. Franco had his hand inside his jacket. Slowly, he raised it, showing it was empty. He raised his other hand. "It is over. Silvio, let her go." "Not while I am breathing," Silvio spat, dragging Vita backward step by step toward the dark water of the pier. "You walk away. You let me go. You walk away and she lives. That is the deal." "There are no more deals," Franco said, his voice a low, cold rumble. He took one slow step forward. "Stay back, I will do it." Franco took another step. His eyes locked on Silvio's, never blinking, a picture of absolute, terrifying calm. Ray was on the gravel, her heart hammering against her bruised ribs. She saw the standoff. She saw Silvio's finger tightening on the trigger, his desperation warring with his cowardice. She saw Franco walking calmly into a bullet. She had to break the equation. She lifted her camera. She did not aim to frame a shot. She aimed it at Silvio's face. Her thumb found the button for the external flash, forcing it to full power. Thwomp! A single, blinding flash popped. A miniature sun exploding in Silvio's eyes. It was disorienting, agonizing. Silvio roared. "Ah!" He recoiled, his head snapping back, blinking frantically at the massive purple spots that had burned away his vision. It was all Vita needed. She drove her heel back, stamping hard on Silvio's instep. As he grunted, she slammed her head back, connecting with his nose with a sickening crunch. His grip loosened. She spun, dropping low, twisting out of his hold as he fired the gun wildly into the air. Franco was already moving. He did not lunge. He did not tackle. He closed the distance in a single, fluid motion. Before Silvio could recover his balance, Franco's hand shot out, grabbing Silvio's gun hand, not his wrist. He twisted, forcing the barrel up. His other hand formed into a rigid blade, struck the ulnar nerve in Silvio's elbow. The gun clattered to the wet concrete. Franco spun Silvio around, locking his arm, and drove a single, precise chop to the side of his neck. Silvio collapsed, his body folding, landing on his knees. He was choking, disarmed, and finished. The entire takedown had taken less than 3 seconds. The first FOCD agents swarmed in, weapons raised. "Hands up, all of you down on the ground." Silvio, on his knees, looked up at Franco, his nose bleeding, his eyes watering from the flash. He started to laugh, a wheezing, broken sound. You did it. You beat me. He coughed, spitting blood. But you cannot give me to them. Watch me, Franco growled. No. You fool. You do not understand, Silvio's voice was a desperate rasp. You hand me your own blood, your consigliere, to the feds. You break the code. You break omerta. You're not just giving them me. You are giving them the family. They will use me to gut us. The capos, the old men. They will never forgive this. They will hunt you. They will hunt her. He spat, nodding at Ray. Giving me to them is suicide. Franco, you die. Your legacy dies. Franco stood over him, the sirens washing them in red and blue light. He could feel the weight of 100 years of tradition, of street law, of blood loyalty. He looked at the approaching agents, their weapons leveled. Then, his gaze found Ray. She was slowly getting to her feet, covered in mud, her shoulder bleeding through her jacket. She was holding her camera, its lens pointed down. She was not pleading. She was not demanding. She was just watching him, her gaze steady, her eyes reflecting the flashing lights. In her eyes, he did not see an accomplice. He saw a witness. He saw the woman from the fish market. He saw the faint, terrifying outline of a different man. He turned back to Silvio. The code is broken, he said. He reached behind him and pulled a pair of plastic zip-tie cuffs from his own belt. He hauled Silvio's arms behind his back, cinching the plastic so tight it bit into the skin. He grabbed Silvio by the collar of his expensive coat and hauled him to his feet. He shoved him, hard, stumbling, into the arms of the stunned federal agents. He is yours. One agent, his jacket marked Bureau of Port Integrity, grabbed Silvio. Franco turned, walked to Ray's bag, and retrieved the hard drive containing the GoPro footage from Pier 36. He pulled the bloody micro SD card from his own pocket. He walked back to the agent. And this is yours. He pressed the drive and the card into the agent's hand. The Orchid Reef ledger, the Pier 36 murder. It is all there. At that exact moment, his personal phone, the one for family, began to scream. He pulled it out. The caller ID read, Petrie. He answered, his voice calm. Franco, what have you done? Petrie's voice was a panicked shriek. The radios, they are saying you gave Silvio to the feds. It is madness. Franco, madness. Franco held the phone, looking at the chaos of his collapsing empire. His men and Silvio's men were all being cuffed, side by side. He pressed the speakerphone button, his voice cutting over the noise. Petrie, get the council on this line, now! A moment of shouting, of confusion, then the voices of the other capos, tinny and terrified. Boss, what is happening? They are saying you broke the code. Listen to me, all of you, Franco said, his voice projecting across the yard. Silvio Moretti is in federal custody. He's a traitor. The old way, his way, is over. You cannot do this. This is not our way. It is my way, Franco stated, his voice absolute. From this night, Sierra Logistics is clean. All of it, every route, every shell, all the money laundering. It stops tonight. A stunned, horrified silence met his words. This is our future. If anyone has a problem with that, if anyone wants to shoot me for it, I am standing at North River Yards, Track 4. Come and try. He ended the call, plunging the phone into his pocket. The silence that followed was broken by a single, sharp crack from the darkness at the edge of the rail yard. A rogue shooter, one of Tino's loyalists, or a capo who had just made his choice. Instinct took over. Franco turned, moving to shield Ray. He was not fast enough. Ray moved, not away, but at him. She threw her entire body into his, shoving him backward as the bullet shrieked through the air where his head had just been. It sparked violently off the steel side of a boxcar. They hit the wet gravel in a tangle of limbs, Ray landing on top of him, her body shielding his, her good arm thrown protectively over his head. The rain began to fall again, harder now, a cold deluge. She was breathing hard, her face inches from his, mud streaking her cheek. "Shoot her down," an agent yelled, followed by a short burst of return fire. The yard fell silent again, save for the rain and the crackle of radios. The agent from the Bureau of Port Integrity walked over, looking down at them in the mud. He nodded. "Mr. Ciara, you just chose a much harder future." Franco did not look up at the agent. His eyes were locked on Ray's, on the fierce, protective fire in them. She was still covering him. Slowly, his hand, covered in mud, came up. He gently pushed a wet strand of hair from her face. His suit was ruined. He was bleeding from a graze on his temple. But he smiled, a small, raw, and genuine smile. "Harder," he breathed, his voice rough. "But it is a future." Weeks later, the air in the Eastern District Courthouse was stale, thick with the weight of consequence. Silvio Moretti, looking 20 years older, his expensive suit hanging loosely on a frame thinned by fear, stood before the judge. Faced with the irrefutable video evidence from Pier 36 and the digital ledger from the micro-SD card, his defense had crumbled. He pled guilty to conspiracy to commit murder and a dozen other charges, agreeing to testify against the entire Gray Harbor collective network across 3 states. Franco was not in that courtroom. He was in Luca Finori's office, staring out the window, as the lead prosecutor from the Bureau of Port Integrity, the new uncorrupted agency, laid out the terms. "Mr. Moretti's testimony is extensive," the prosecutor said, stacking a pile of folders. "The FOCD is satisfied. They are dropping the primary summons against you. Mr. Ciara." Franco said nothing, just continued to watch the tugboats on the river. "The price," he stated. "A 5-year monitoring agreement, full, transparent access for the Harbor Ethics Commission, and the immediate, voluntary dissolution of 42 shell corporations tied to Ciara Logistics." Luca winced. It was a complete gutting of the old empire. Franco turned from the window. Done. It was the cost of freedom. Within a week, the Ciara Logistics name, now scrubbed of all its dark associations, was the first signatory on the new Clean Port Pledge. The empire was smaller, legal, and his. The gallery in Dumbo was packed, the white walls vibrating with the sound of conversation and clinking glasses. The exhibit was titled Port of Second Chances. Ray Donovan's name was on the wall in clean, black letters. The photographs were not what the critics had expected. There was no blood, no guns, no sensationalism. Instead, she had captured the port's humanity. A close-up of a longshoreman's hands, the knuckles like old walnuts, stained with grease, the tired, hopeful eyes of a young woman at the helm of a forklift, and, on the main wall, a large, stunningly stark photograph, the back of a man in a black cashmere coat, standing alone in the rain at the fish market. Franco arrived late. The crowd, a mix of artists and Brooklyn socialites, parted for him, a quiet murmur following in his wake. He was in a simple dark suit, no tie. In his hand, he held a small, tight bouquet of white carnations. He ignored the stares. His eyes found her immediately, across the room. She was talking to a critic, her arm in a simple black sling, her smile bright and real. Then his gaze was caught by a photograph in a quiet alcove, one he had not seen before. It was just shadows. 2 silhouettes on a corrugated tin wall, their heads bent together over a map. The small plaque beneath it read, Home, GPG. He stood before it, his defenses, his mask, his control all useless. He saw the cold, the fear, the desperation of that night, and the moment she had put her camera over his heart, a single, sharp tremor ran through his lower lip. She was beside him, her presence a sudden warmth. You came. He turned, holding out the flowers. My mother always said white carnations meant true loyalty. She took them, her fingers brushing his, the scent of them filling the space between them. He looked from the photo of their shadows back to her face. I cannot promise you peace. Ray, I cannot promise you this will be easy. The old families, they are watching. This new way is harder. I know, she whispered. I can only promise honesty, he said, his voice low and raw, meant only for her. So, the truth, if you tell me to go, I will walk out of this gallery right now, and I will never bother you again. But if you tell me to stay—" He took a sharp, unsteady breath. "If you say stay, I stay, and I will build this new life with you." Ray looked at his face, at the man who had walked out of the shadows for her, the man who had chosen a harder future. She smiled, her eyes blurring the gallery lights. "Stay," she whispered, "but we build it with the truth. No more shadows. Franco." She reached out and took his hand. His large, calloused hand closed around hers, lacing their fingers together. It fit, just as it had in the ICU. Only this time, they were both strong. Later that night, they were in her apartment, a small loft overlooking the East River. The city lights glittered on the dark, restless water like a carpet of fallen stars. Her camera was on the table, next to the carnations in a water glass. They stood by the window, their joined hands a silent anchor. He turned her to face him, his movements slow, deliberate, almost hesitant. His free hand came up, not to grab, but to gently cup her jaw, his thumb stroking the curve of her cheek. He leaned in and kissed her. It was not the desperate crash in the church or the fearful discovery in the cabin. It was slow, soft, and questioning. It was a kiss of arrival. She kissed him back, her own hand sliding up his chest, feeling the steady, calm beat of his heart beneath the fine cotton of his shirt. His arms wrapped around her, one hand spreading wide on her lower back, the other high on her shoulders, consciously protecting her wound, pulling her close. They breathed each other in, the scent of the rain and the gallery wine and just them. When they finally broke apart, a small, shared sound, half laugh, half sigh, escaped them both. He rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed, his hand moved, his fingers lightly tracing the fabric over her collarbone, a whisper of a touch. He paused, his eyes opening, asking the silent question. She met his gaze, her answer clear. This was their new language. She gave a single, slow nod. Just as he leaned in again, his phone, the clean one, vibrated on the counter, a harsh, intrusive sound. He sighed, pulling back, but Ray laughed, a real, free laugh. "Answer it. We build with the truth. Remember, no secrets." He glanced at the screen. A text from Arden Cho. A slow, genuine smile spread across his face. A smile that reached his eyes, transforming him. "What is it?" Ray asked. "The final piece," he said, turning the screen to her. The text was short. "The Orchid Reef Fund was officially dissolved an hour ago. All assets have been rerouted. Every dollar is going to the new Harbor Ethics Commission Community Fund for the families." Ray stared at the words, the blood money, washed clean, the violence, turned into hope, the cycle, finally broken. Dawn, Red Hook. The sky was a pale, clear gray, the sun a rumor of warmth behind the clouds. The long night was over. Ray stood on the end of the pier, her camera in her hand. She was wearing Franco's heavy overcoat, its wool still holding his scent. She felt him before she heard him. He came up behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. He rested his chin on her shoulder, his warmth a solid, living shield against the world. They stood in silence, watching the port he had saved by tearing it down come to life. In the distance, a massive container ship sounded its horn, a deep, resonant blast that echoed across the water. It was not an alarm. It was not a warning. It was the sound of a departure, a signal for a new voyage. The knot, tied in violence and fear on these very docks, had finally been undone, right where it all began. They had chosen each other. And then, at the last possible minute, they had chosen the right path. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please comment below and share your thoughts. Be sure to subscribe to Mafia Boss Stories, like this video, and show your support by hitting that hype button to help this story reach more listeners.